Coming up with This Week in Computer Hardware, Intel says stop patching Spectre. GPU prices are unhinged. Samsung's 860 gets reviewed. The first Ryzen-powered laptops are coming, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 450, recorded January 25th, 2018. You can't afford a GPU, people.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Casper, a sleep brand that continues to revolutionize its line of products to create an exceptionally comfortable sleep experience one night at a time. You can save $50 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/Twitch and using promo code TWICH at checkout.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most engaging, most informative, and occasionally most delightful information on PC hardware. Today, we have nothing but doom, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Shrout. Can you hear me, sir?
I absolutely can. It's nice that we can bring the community down a little bit with us. Doom and gloom scenarios abound. Yeah, over the last several weeks. It's very true.
Oh my goodness. So we're at the I'm finally almost done hacking from CES. We've had Spectre and Meltdown patches. We've had Bitcoin prices falling, but it doesn't seem to be helping, because the first thing is Intel earlier this week released a super chill newsroom update. Looking at that, and I'm just like, updated guidance
last week.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we recommend OEMs, cloud service providers, system manufacturers, software vendors, and end users stop deployment of current versions as they may introduce higher than expected reboots and other unpredictable system behavior. And then it gives you a link for the full list of platforms. We ask that our industry partners focus efforts on testing early versions of the updated solutions so we can accelerate its release. And then they're like, we continue to urge all customers to vigilantly maintain security best practice and for consumers to keep systems up to date, despite the fact that keeping your system up to date may cause it to behave erratically or constantly reboot. They've basically found the root cause of the reboot issues on Broadwell and Haswell. They started updating it. It's just messy, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, in theory, I should be okay for this firmware update for my laptop. But now I'm like, it's my production laptop. I'm already been getting a bunch of pink screens of death on my other laptop. At the same time that's going on, there's a Mac OS patch for older operating systems for Sierra and El Capitan to stop Meltdown. So it's messy.
Last week it was Intel saying, here's our performance data. And I think most of our story last week was about the performance deltas that they measured and they saw and they reported. And there was a side note about, we noticed, we realized that there's this reboot issue. We're working to root cause it, et cetera, et cetera. It was kind of like the side part of it. The most important part of it was the performance degradation.
Right.
And then literally over the course of a few days, they came back and said, okay, actually now we've root caused the issue. They didn't say what it was, but they root caused the reboot issue and changed it to, it's possible that maybe we don't recommend installing these particular patches for mission critical locations. And then I think it was yesterday it came out and they said, actually, nobody should install these patches, which is really significant when you think about it, because I would have wagered that Intel would take the potential security risk so much more heavily than the potential stability risk, that it would have to be a pretty significant issue for them to suddenly decide they no longer wanted. They would prefer people be vulnerable to the attack as opposed to potentially have stability, and clearly they've gone the other way. The only, and I, you know, that's a fine decision. It just kind of means that the reboot issue was more widespread than maybe we thought at first. But they also don't really give us a time frame for when new versions will be available.
Right. We're working on it feverishly.
Yeah.
Just like they were working on the last round feverishly. Maybe it's time to stop working feverishly and start slowing down and figuring out some better testing. But yeah, I mean, I have one of the laptop I'm actually in the process of sort of decommissioning and taking everything off of. I was laughing because literally I've gotten a pink screen of death, I think 6 times in 4 days. Pink being the new blue. I think maybe some people think it's red, but on my laptop it looks particularly pink. And you know, I maybe it just happens to have happened around the time I think I've had I put a firmware update on there, but you know, it's not what you want to hear, where it's like, okay, the fix is worse than the problem, because, you know, we really haven't seen the problem hit yet. So even if you're a giant multinational corporation that's going to get sued into the oblivion, if, you know, somebody figures out the way to exploit this code on one of your servers, just hold off, because it's a hot mess. So you know, there's not much more to say about that than, you know, things are messy. They're moving forward. You know, it doesn't seem to be impacting some of the non-Intel products. We wait with bated breath. The other thing that was crazy is you know, we talked about the new tech thing. You know, in our CES coverage, we talked about the new processors from Intel with the integrated AMD graphics, and we talked about the new AMD processors that were announced at CES 2018. And we had a post on there where somebody was like, between the cost of memory and GPUs, building PCs is dead. And so I ended up going kind of feral, and you can watch the whole thing on Tech Thing this week. You know, but there's taking a look at, you know, what it would cost, what my 1800X AMD Ryzen 7 1800X machine cost to build, you know, in sort of April, and then I upgraded the GPU around June when I was doing the 8K monitor testing because I needed a more powerful GPU, versus what it would cost to build it right now, and the difference is pretty substantial. Because of the cost of GPUs, and memory's gone up. We talked about this. We warned you about this, that memory's going to go up in price. But at this point, it's doubled. Effectively, I want to say doubled in the last 12 months. And if you go back like 15 months, it's almost tripled, because we had sort of the lowest price per gigabyte of memory, I think, in the history of memory, followed by Chinese phone manufacturers deciding to put all the DRAM possible on Android phones for China and other places. And demand went nuts. You know, it looks like Samsung's going to bring literally is going to increase world capacity on RAM by about 20% in 2018. I talked to Corsair's senior product manager for memory was basically like, we don't anticipate prices going down anytime soon, but hopefully when Samsung brings this additional capacity online, they'll start to drive it down. And maybe when they bring that additional capacity online, that's when phone manufacturers are going to start going to like 16 gigabytes of RAM for Android phones. But I bring all that up because if you're not building a gaming machine where you need powerful 3D graphics, or a video editing machine, or a Photoshop machine where you need a whole bunch of CUDA cores, you know, the price has gone up. But at the same time, the price on memory has gone up. The price on CPUs has dropped, in some cases drastically, right? Because, you know, for example, that 1800X processor that was $500 in April is now $350. There's been, you know, fairly healthy drops in the cost of most of the Intel processors. So, you know, 16 gigabytes cost twice as much as it did a year ago, but that's still $100 on, say, $1,000 PC. If you're building a $500 PC and you want 16 gigabytes of RAM, it's going to be a $600 PC this year. But what's crazy is looking at the GPU numbers, and you know, it's also really crazy is, you know, when we recorded the show on Tuesday, that, you know, what I thought was an overpriced 1070 at $400, you know, back in June, the beginning of June, tail end of May, is now looking like, the bargain of a lifetime, right? Because a few days ago it was listing at $1,100 if you could even find one for sale. And if you want to go to nowinstock.net, you're going to and start putting on all the alerts. You're going to need to if you're going to find a GPU. There's cases where pre-orders are coming up, and the pre-orders are selling out almost instantly. So if you need a new GPU, you're going to be playing a serious cat and mouse game to track one down. But looking at that chart, it's dropped like $100. It's dropped from $1,100 to $1,000. 4 days ago, it was still peaked out at $1,100, despite the fact that Bitcoin had dropped 50% in the previous week or two. And I bring up Bitcoin because if you start looking at this, as the Bitcoin prices went nuts, people started going crazy about buying GPUs, despite the fact that you really can't effectively mine for Bitcoin with GPUs anymore. You need dedicated ASICs, although people were doing mining for Ethereum and other stuff. But it's the price was as low as, I want to say, like $450, $475, right around Black Friday, and then it has just gone berserk. So hopefully what we'll see in the next few weeks, now that Bitcoin has dropped precipitously, is that we'll see the prices of GPUs dropping and the availability to go up. Hopefully, GPU manufacturers are flogging their assembly lines. But
right.
If you need a powerful GPU, you're either going to spend a lot of money or you're going to need to wait. And you're looking at nowinstock.net, and it's horrifying. There's like no GPUs anywhere. You can get in sort of a stock watch and try to get updates and keep on top of it that way. And it's impacting. It's impacting major vendors too, because like I'm looking at, I looked at Lenovo and Dell, and it was also funny because there were some machines that did not show up when you searched for NVIDIA GTX graphics under the Dell.com website. There was like one $3,000 Alienware box that showed up there. If you went to the Alienware website, some less expensive machines showed up. But you're looking at like 1060, a Core i5 7400. Machine with 1060 graphics is selling for $1,100. So even companies that are buying in volumes like Dell or Alienware or Lenovo are getting hammered. Like a 1070 powered system with a Core i7 7700 is $1,750 right now.
Right.
That's all GPU. I was looking at my. The difference between my system that I built in April and now was close to, I want to say $700 difference. And it was, a little bit of that was memory, but most of it was GPU. So, it's pretty ugly if you're into gaming, or if you need, CUDA cores for a video editing machine or a Photoshop machine. If you don't, then everything's hunky-dory, and laptops with gaming laptops are starting to almost look like a bargain because of the parity between performance on the mobile GTX, 1060, 1070, 1080. So something to think about.
What's interesting to me is, so on the OEM side, it's, I've seen some of both. Like the reason I started having this conversation was I went to Costco. The power was out in our office, and what am I going to do? I'm going to go wander around Costco for a bit. And so I go there, and there's an Acer desktop. Yeah, there's an Acer desktop PC there that's $11.99, and it has a GTX 1070 and a Core i7 7700 and 32 gigs of RAM and a 256 gig SSD. I don't know if it was SATA or PCIe. And I started looking at it, and I was like, I think this is actually like a really good deal, all things considered.
Right.
And it turns out it is, right? If a GTX 1070 is going for $700+ and 32 gigs of memory is going for like $400, yeah. Like suddenly the memory and the GPU are the cost of the system. You're getting the rest of these components as kind of like a throw-in. And if you're somebody who's been waiting to build a PC, you want to upgrade, these are much better options out there. Now, there are some people that have increased their OEM prices, their system prices accordingly. But if you go look at Best Buy, there are some HP Omen gaming desktops. Ken did a good job of putting together a spreadsheet that shows like, okay, here's a DIY system compared to a couple of like OEM desktops. And we've seen instances where they're $100 to $300 less expensive to buy OEM. Nice. And it actually puts an interesting topic out there about like gaming notebooks. Gaming notebooks were always, hey, yeah, they're, you can get comparable desktop performance, but you're always going to pay a premium for them. Well, now maybe you don't have to, right? Maybe it's $100 difference instead of $400 difference between comparable consumer and desktop parts. So
it's interesting. I want to immediately go to Costco after the show because I don't remember seeing any desktop systems in the Costco last time I went in, and that may be sort of the difference between being in the Bay Area where you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a tech company or somebody who's a programmer or versus the availability of these systems in Kentucky. But now I want to go look at Best Buy and Costco and any place else that has systems in stock for sale and see what I can find out there. I mean, the irony is it's the sort of just-in-time system that traditionally has allowed Dell and other online manufacturer or mail order manufacturers to save customers money is now working against them because if they can't get the parts without paying. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean you're right. I also wonder if some of this might be a delay in recognizing the change in the market, and then also a lot of if you're Acer, you're not buying parts at Newegg. You probably have like a preset cost per quarter with your customers, maybe per year, right? You set a contract. I guarantee I'll buy, $28,000 of this particular GPU. You guarantee to sell them to me at this price, and now that reseller is kind of guaranteed that. And so now Acer and Dell, HP, whoever, has to make the decision of, okay, do we want to use this as an opportunity of growth? Do we want to use this as an opportunity to gain customers, potential repeat customers? Or do we adjust to the market that is now selling graphics cards for 2x their price to increase our margins? So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the next couple of months on this side. Or will all the desktop PCs with discrete graphics cards just sell out anyway, and then we're back to the same story?
We'll find out. In the meantime, good read from Phoronix. Linux gaming for older low-end graphics cards in 2018. And basically what happened was I guess a Phoronix reader or readers asked them to look at low-end and older graphics cards to, quote, see how they're performing with current generation Linux games on OpenGL and Vulkan. So they grabbed like 10 what would be relatively cheap GPUs right now, or GPUs you can actually find sort of in the back of the workshop, and took a look at the gaming performance on those. So if you've been looking for an excuse to play around with some Linux gaming, and you're wondering what's going to happen with like a GTX 650 or 750 or that Radeon R7 260X that you have stuffed somewhere, it's a good read. And it's also really funny to be like, oh, X-Plane 11, Mad Max, Super Tux cart. Oh, man.
Yep.
So just something worth taking a look at. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware, guess what? It's brought to you by Casper. Casper is an online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the cost. Oh my goodness. Casper's revolutionizing the mattress industry by cutting the cost of dealing with resellers and showrooms and passing the savings directly to the consumer. Casper's mattress is an obsessively engineered mattress at a fair price. And I got to say, I hate mattress shopping. It is traumatizing and painful. It makes buying a used car seem like fun. The original Casper mattress combined multiple supportive memory foams for a sleep surface with just the right sink and just the right bounce. Plus, its breathable design helps you sleep cool and regulate your temperature through the night. A Casper mattress provides a long-lasting comfort and support. You can buy it easily online and completely risk-free. Leo is a big fan of the Casper mattress. I have not had a chance to try the Casper mattress, but he says it's soft, it's comfortable. And what's crazy about Casper, what's awesome about Casper, they get the idea that you should be able to try out a mattress, truly try out a mattress, because you're going to spend a third of your life on it. There's really, laying on a mattress in a store for 20 minutes, it's not a legit test. Casper offers free delivery and painless returns with a 100-day period. You got 100 days to see if this mattress works for you, so you don't have to lie down in a showroom. Casper mattresses uphold the highest environmental production standards and are made in the USA. Free shipping and returns to the US, Canada, and the UK. Get a Casper mattress today. You can save $50 towards select mattresses by going to casper.com/Twitch and entering the promo code TWiCH at checkout. That's casper.com/TWiCH with the promo code TWiCH to save $50 on select mattresses. Terms and conditions apply, and we want to thank Casper for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh my goodness. I actually need a new mattress, and I think I know where I'm going.
There you go.
Oh my
Now you
goodness.
got your chance.
I don't want to talk about mattress stores.
It's good.
The stories I could tell. Weeping, gnashing of teeth, rending of clothes. Goodness. iOS 11.3 previews coming out. Something exciting for those of us with older iPhones. I'm actually in the process of Geekbench testing and replacing the battery on this to look at a before and after on the performance, right? But the idea was that the operating system is throttling performance to prevent the system from effectively shutting down because the battery couldn't deliver enough power. And now iOS 11.3 is, along with sort of, ARKit experiences and more animojis for messages, because who doesn't want to look like some weird dragon cat thing when talking to friends and family. But they're going to add some features to show battery health and recommend if a battery needs to be serviced under settings/battery. And those are going to be available for the iPhone 6 and later. And they're going to make it more transparent. Users, quote, can now see if the power management feature that dynamically manages maximum performance to prevent unexpected shutdowns, first introduced in iOS 10.2.1, is on and can choose to turn it off. Also under settings/battery. And then that's going to be the iPhone 6, 6 Plus, SE, 6S, 6S Plus, 7, and 7 Plus. And those are going to be coming in a later iOS 11.3 beta release. So if you have been gnashing your teeth and rending your clothing, the theme of this week's episode, over throttling in the iOS universe, now's your chance, people. To see if it's on and to do something about it. Samsung dropped the 860s. What's the word on that from Mr. Malventano?
So it's kind of interesting if you think about it, right? Because the SATA SSD world has not been particularly exciting or innovative in recent months/years. I think the 850s, Pros, and Evos were 3 years ago, right? Yeah. They've been out for a significant amount of time. We've seen some other competitors, Toshiba's released a drive, Micron released a drive, and Intel's released a drive in that time frame. But nobody's really kind of caught up to the performance level of the 850 Evo, although the gap has been narrowing. So the 860 Pro and Evo was an interesting kind of, oh, hey, we're going to do some more SATA. At this point, it kind of felt like Samsung could have ridden on the wave of the 850 for the foreseeable future. Nobody would have, had any complaints about it.
It's fast. So it's cheap. Why fix it?
Right. So they've changed the controller a little bit. The flash is the flash actually evolved on the 850 from when its initial release through iterations. So really no changes there from the most recent 850s to the 860. You do get some capacity improvements. You get up to 4 terabytes on both the Pro and the Evo, which, hey, 4 terabyte drives I'm a big fan of. Maybe not the cost necessarily, but the rest of it, yep, I'm fine with. The performance, though, is interesting in that it's not really better. At least it's not better across the board. There are some instances where it is a little bit better. Your kind of max throughput is a little bit better. But in the world of SATA drives, max throughput has kind of been nearly peaked for quite some time. So the issues that were more interesting were low Q depth performance, something that NVMe and Optane really address. But on the SATA side, that's where if there was room to grow and to change and to improve the performance profile, that might be where it is. However, the 860s appear to be a little bit behind the 850s in that area, which is unfortunate. Also, there's some complications about trim performance and drives. If you go to quick format of a drive, it might take 45 seconds to complete. Like the system just kind of hangs there for 45 seconds, which is, a pretty bad user experience. So even though it has good performance, the endurance has gone way up. So people who may or may, may be worried about like the endurance ratings of SSDs, that has increased. The warranty has actually gone down from 10 years to 5 years, I think, on the Pro. But the endurance has gone up, right? Like, so in theory, you could do more writing to it in that time span. Pricing also doesn't really change much from where the 850s were, right? Like the 850 Pro ranges from, the 512 gig models, $250. You're looking at 49 cents per gig. The 500 gig 860 Evo is $170 to 34 cents a gig. These are all like okay prices, but they're not big price drops. And if you consider, the latest Crucial MX drives that were released, even Intel has an NVMe drive that came out this week as well, that Alan's actively working on his review of. Like, they're all competitive in that price point, maybe even a little bit less, and doing different things in performance. Maybe not across the board faster in the case of the MX drive, but different and more unique. So, the 860 kind of feels like maybe Samsung said, we've had the 850 out there for long enough. It's time to do something else, as opposed to really having a technological drive and need to release something else.
Sure.
I still believe Samsung has the strongest name in solid state drives. So they will just kind of de facto sell a ton of these as people are going in, and they're price competitive. It's not like they're super overpriced, but no dramatic changes that make us recommend this drive over the 850s that existed. And in fact, chances are if we see sales on the 850s because of the 860s release, that's obviously where you should look if you're building a system, upgrading a system, or just need to get some more SSDs in inventory for future use, type of thing.
I'm not sure how to react. Like, well, good.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of fun.
Yeah. I just, okay.
Just not used to that with Samsung drives, right? Usually when we see a new Samsung drive, we're talking about some pretty significant performance improvement in some area, or, hey, this is the first time you're using this type of flash, or
the prices drop down again.
Yeah, agreed. And that's just, none of that has really happened in this instance.
Well, at least they don't suck.
And all be winners.
Put
it on the box.
And it's also, it's interesting also to watch. I will be curious to see if SSD prices stay consistent over 2018, or if they start to drop again.
Yeah.
We'll see. First Ryzen-powered laptops from Acer and Lenovo. That about sums it up, right? Back in October, AMD launched or debuted, announced, shouted from the rooftops about the Ryzen processor with Radeon Vega graphics. And Acer Swift 3, they've got a $749 version with a Ryzen 5 2500U with Vega 8 graphics, and a $949 version with a Ryzen 7 2700U and integrated Radeon Vega 10 graphics. These are big, healthy laptops. These are 15.6-inch 1080p laptops. So not super svelte, but the IdeaPad 720S, pardon me, everybody, for the coughing, is a little closer to the Dell XPS 13 I lived my life on, because this one's a 12 by 8.4 by half-inch thick, 2.5 pounds AMD Ryzen 5 2500U powered system, again with the Radeon Vega 8 graphics, and not bad, like 8 gigabytes of RAM. Decent form factor, fairly light. $1,049 is the price on that. It's curious, I guess, that they're only offering a single memory channel config on that, because one of the things that Ken notes in this article is that this is going to probably slow the integrated graphics, because the integrated graphics need memory bandwidth, and this is essentially a single memory channel configuration on that one. So
which is confusing, actually, right? Because if you think about it, integrated graphics depends on that system memory for performance, and arguably, I think, still a significant portion of that. So I'll be very curious to get hands-on with the Lenovo machine and see how much reduction there is in graphics performance capability, which is also, it's even more odd because that system offers the Ryzen 7 2700U option as well. So it offers the highest performance APU mobile part that that AMD sells, but they're offering it in this kind of neutered configuration. So I don't, I'm surprised that AMD allowed it to happen. Again,
choice.
They don't really have the control over it, but is there some technical reason why Lenovo had to do that in order to get it into a 13.3 inch form factor, because it's the only 13.3 inch Ryzen mobile form factor? Seems unlikely, but I don't know.
In terms of, in terms of when you're looking at the Radeon Vega 8, Vega 10, are we talking about anywhere near like GTX 1050, 1060, 1070, or something that's going to be better than Intel integrated graphics, but slower than NVIDIA's discrete graphics?
I think it's going to be somewhere in it's going to be below the 1050, right? Because if you look at the TDP of this part for Ryzen Mobile is arguably 15 watts, probably up to 35 watts, depending on the system design that you get. It's probably 50% better than the Intel graphics, maybe scaling up to 100% faster than the Intel graphics, but not 1050 level graphics. I would say your MX 150 is your better comparison point.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
AMD finally hires a replacement for Raja Koduri. What's the story with AMD? Are they gonna make this transition? And will we ever see Radeon Vega graphics cards for sale again?
Well,
because we haven't been able to buy those.
But
okay, yeah. Completely unrelated statements. Something that I didn't note when we talked about the incredible scarcity of NVIDIA GPUs is that the scarcity of Radeon GPUs has been going on for a considerably longer period of time, and I think is less Bitcoin related because they're less desirable to miners because of the power consumption. But let's talk about the big job at AMD.
So Raja left in November. He was the lead of the Radeon Technologies group. Also a big fan favorite from the AMD fans out there. He was pretty pivotal in like the marketing and social side of it. He talked a lot about that type of stuff and was involved. He came out here and did videos with us. He was engaged with the community. So when he left to go to Intel, it was a bit of a shock. And AMD spent, I think, longer than some people expected trying to find replacement of who would lead it. So in the interim, AMD CEO Lisa Su took over, and obviously her job scales or spans many different areas. So I'm not exactly sure how much time she was able to spend, looking at the RTG specifically, but I think it was actually more significant than most would look, because she spent a lot of time looking at the resources, looking at the roadmap, looking at the personnel, trying to figure out what the current state was before they dedicated themselves to finding the right person to replace them. And what they actually did was they hired two different people, one to manage the business side and one to manage the engineering side. So Mike Rayfield comes from Micron. Previously, before that, he was at NVIDIA. He was kind of responsible for the creation of the Tegra brand and bringing NVIDIA into that area. He's kind of going to be the head of the Radeon Technologies group from a business standpoint. His job is to sell product both to consumers, to enterprise, to semi-custom partners, which is a new addition into this group. So whereas before, like the semi-custom parts that include the Xbox and the PlayStation design wins, as well as the Intel Kaby Lake G part, were under kind of more the enterprise and embedded group. Now they're directly under Radeon, which I think makes more sense because honestly, it's the Radeon IP that makes those semi-custom designs useful, right? Or differentiates them in the rest of the market. So that's his responsibility. David Wang comes in he was at AMD from 2002 to 2012. Went to Synaptics for a little while and now is back there. And he has a lot of experience on the GPU side. So, he was part of the GPU development and engineering team from 2002 to 2012. And people who have, know their computer hardware history understand that there were a lot of good times in that window where ATI and AMD had leadership positions in performance and efficiency. They had great products. They had good marketing, and everything was kind of working. So he understands where they need to get back to, which I think is important. And he just has a lot of experience in that space, which is surprisingly hard to come by. There are a lot of companies willing to hire GPU designers these days, from Apple to ARM to Qualcomm to Tesla to whoever. So getting somebody with a lot of experience is a more difficult task. The problem that I think for consumers, people that watch this show that are interested, is, okay, well, what's going to change and when? And it's a longer process than most want to be the case. Just because you bring in new executives doesn't mean something changes overnight. On the business side, you might be able to renegotiate contracts or start new deals or start new campaigns right away. But from an engineering standpoint, like if there was something fundamentally wrong with the GPU design and you wanted to start over, that's a 3-year deal. If you want to take the current design you have and massage it into something better, probably a minimum of a 1-year deal. So even if David is the most brilliant magician of computer and electrical engineering that we've ever seen, the world's ever known, he's not going to come in and next quarter have Navi out early on an early process technology, releasing and beating NVIDIA overnight, right? It's just not how this type of stuff works.
Right.
What it does mean is they've set a path. They know what direction they're going to go in. I would like to see them talk about that path. Talk about their roadmap and what their plans are, put a stake in the ground, and then let's set a goal and see if they can meet it. I don't know how quickly they would be willing to do some of that stuff, but I think it's good news for AMD overall. There's no more cloud hanging over them about who's going to fill this position. When we did our CES meetings, when we did this press briefing, Lisa came out and talked about the GPU side for a little bit, which seemed a little odd, because every other division had their leads come out and talk about it. And then, we didn't really have a Raja replacement up on stage telling us about the future of graphics. So that should change now. We have the right people in place according to them. So now let's see if they can make up ground and build new products and compete against NVIDIA and solve the cryptocurrency mining crisis at the same time. I don't know. Make them do everything. I'm fine with that. Somebody fix it, please.
Stop this whole cryptocurrency mining madness. Speaking of madness, what were you thinking? Or what was Jim thinking? He built a Plex server with an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 1950X. This just seems delightfully over the top. I mean, was he thinking about re-rendering 4K video on the fly to multiple devices simultaneously, or did you guys finally well, we can't use this Threadripper, for video capture. Let's use it to build the server from hell. This is just awesome and slightly ridiculous.
It is. So yeah, you don't need this kind of power if you have a Plex server that you're using for just you, right? And in fact, like the NVIDIA Shield acts as a Plex server, and it's just fine. It actually does surprisingly well, even for like single stream transcodes. But let's say you had an office with a big shared group of people. You have a gigabit internet connection, and you thought, well, why don't we just pool all of our data, all of our media into one collection? And then we can just all share it out from there. Now, when you do that, and now all of a sudden my wife might be watching something, I might be watching something, my daughter, et cetera, you extend out. Now all of a sudden you have the possibility of there being a significant quantity of streams running at the same time. So hence the power of something like a Ryzen Threadripper processor, 16 cores, 32 threads. That was the idea for the build, is we wanted a lot of compute power, because that server also acts as the file server for our office network as well. Okay. In theory, we could probably serve simultaneously 10 to 11 Plex users off of that machine based on performance estimates that Jim came up with. The other interesting part about this platform, other than the Ryzen build, is where we got all the hard drives. There are 16 8 terabyte hard drives in there, Russian Digital Reds, that came from being shucked from external enclosures, right? So we didn't ask Western Digital for these drives. We bought all this stuff, and the while a bare 8 terabyte RAID was probably $250, $280 at the time we were doing this project, sometimes you could find these external 8 terabyte drives for $150. And if you were just willing to break apart some plastic, you could got a fully compatible, Western Digital Red hard drive inside this enclosure. And if you do that 32 times, you get 32 hard drives, as the picture on that website unfortunately shows. Now, I think only 16 of those ended up in our server. 16 of those ended up in Alan's server. That's just the kind of guy he is, right? But it was an interesting project for that regard. On the Plex side, Jim goes through some more details on like the operating system we use. We ended up using Windows 10 for this. We're using an Eureka hardware RAID card for the 16 hard drives. There's FreeNAS and other options that we could have gone into. Most of the problems we found with that surrounded the fact that the Plex server for other alternative operating systems tend to lag behind in features and updates.
Right.
So if you wanted the Plex server that had the most recent updates all the time, you just wanted a Windows machine. It also made our kind of file sharing in the office much easier. Everybody else is on Windows machines, so Windows file sharing just worked better that way, as opposed to having to get involved with cross operating system shares. So it was a really interesting project. It's a 10 gigabit networking base, so we get the throughput we need out of that. The only hiccup being the RAID card seems to be a little bit slower than we expected. Like it's kind of like 700 megabytes per second, even with all those drives, but way better than what we were getting on our gigabit network and file server before, just from doing bulk copies across the network. So should be interesting. We've been using it for a while. Everything seems to be successful, and it's one of those projects that we said, hey, what can you really utilize a Threadripper processor for if you're not doing content creation type massive multitasking type things? And I think a dedicated media transcode server, which is essentially what Plex does, made a lot of sense.
The world's first phone with an in-display fingerprint sensor is here, writes Sam Byford over at The Verge. And it's not from Samsung. It's not from Apple. It's a collaboration between Vivo, which is a big Chinese smartphone manufacturer, which is owned by the company that owns Oppo and OnePlus, both of whom make really, really nice products. So Vivo has announced the X20 Plus UD, and Vivo worked together with Synaptics. And it's cool. They got to actually play around with it at CES 2018. They got their Best in Show award, and it's really simple. It's a fingerprint sensor that is behind the screen, so there's no button or weird little thing on the back of the phone. It's just that simple. Only being released in China right now.
When you say it like that, right?
Yeah. Hey. Look at that. You don't have to have a stupid button in the middle of the back of the phone. You don't have to have a stupid button on the front of the phone. And you can do fingerprint recognition rather than making people, put their face on there. Also, by the way, January 26th, Friday, the day after we record the episode, HomePod pre-orders start. And boy, has the reaction to that been mixed. Some people say they love the way it sounds. You're not going to be able to do multi-room audio when it ships. HomeKit was kind of absent for all intents and purposes from CES this year. I mean, it was there, but mostly conspicuous in that nobody was talking about it. About the pre-orders, Apple went out of their way to discuss that. There's 500 million devices with Siri out there. But the big thing for me is that it's apparently only going to work with Apple Music. And I just think that's a staggeringly, I don't want to, I love my iPhone. I certainly love what, Apple's done with a lot of audio products over the year. And there's a particularly brilliant article I read, I want to say on The Verge, where they talked about one of the initial responses to the iPod that was basically like, this is stupid. And he's torn between people didn't get the iPod and the iPod kind of changed everything. And so he's loath to, the author was loath to sort of, kick the HomePod, but this is an expensive speaker with an incredibly limited, kind of an incredibly limited musical options. Curious to finally hear it for myself. And but I just, there's not a, Siri isn't particularly, doesn't seem to be extensively integrated into this. Multi-room audio is not going to happen until later this year. Apple Music is the only music option for this. I'm a little confused about that. So
I mean, it's from this feature outlook, it's kind of like it appears like they're splitting the difference between competing against Sonos and competing against Echo, right? Yeah. Or Google Home, right? So they have Siri and they have some HomeKit capabilities, but they don't have anywhere near the third-party support of infrastructure, or even that they've expressed interest in that third-party support for the infrastructure,
right?
Which the Amazon Echo group has completely dominated for the most part. And then you look at Sonos, and there's some other competitors that are just like the wireless speaker infrastructure. I think Apple has a huge advantage over somebody like Sonos out the gate, just because they can make everything work perfectly together for all those people, those 500 million people that own iPhones or iPads. And
it's also
same reason that the Apple TV is super convenient.
And Sonos's response also to this is that, if you look at their Twitter feed, you're going to be able to pick up 2 Sonos Ones with Amazon Alexa built in, and over 80 streaming services, they know, 2 for $349, which is a pretty good deal. And they also, it was interesting to see that, Sonos, who was not always the most open platform, did a big blog entry on why open matters fairly recently. So, or just like yesterday. But I think it's going to be really curious to watch this. It was, one of the things that, I've been playing around with Alexa in my truck, and one of the most frustrating things for me, and Alexa car charger that is amusing me to no end, because literally I am talking to this Anchor, the Anchor Rove Viva car charger, and I'm now my 22-year-old diesel truck, and I'm having it fire up Audible or open up music, and but Spotify's not currently integrated, right? Spotify is something I use constantly. Tidal's not integrated, so and it's a little frustrating because, for example, I can have it call and it will actually initiate the call, but I have to press the call button on the phone to make it happen. And I bring that up because at the same time, Google Assistant, above and beyond the incredible amount of advertising Google spent, promoting itself at CES 2018, Google's made tremendous strides to catch up with, Amazon's Alexa. Now that I realize I was saying Alexa, sorry everybody. And it just seems like Apple's making it even more difficult than it has to be for them. And even worse, Samsung's still trying to push Bixby. Like they're, we can really compete with, 2 better, more entrenched technologies that seem to actually work. But between the Bixby button and all the Bixby announcements at CES this year, I just remember being like, oh, man, I hope y'all turn it around, but I'm not holding my breath on Bixby.
Yep.
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to watch all this settle out. So I'll be curious to see how people react to the HomePod. If it was me, I'd say 2 Sonos Ones for $350 and getting stereo separation is much more attractive than having a single point source for audio in a room. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, you mean there's all kinds of other, like, I agree with you about the Sonos not traditionally being known as the open company, but like they've done some stuff recently. Like I can control my Sonos speakers from my house,
right,
through the Spotify app, which is actually really convenient to do. So depending on where you listen to your music, like if you are an Apple Music person, then it seems like it might just make sense. for that. But for Sonos, it's all about the other stuff. So yeah, I am also very curious what the reaction will be. Obviously, I think they're going to lean heavily into sound quality. That will take, the echoes out of the equation. Mostly, they're fine speakers, but not audiophile speakers. Whereas Sonos has always been about quality as well. So interesting launch coming up soon.
Oh my goodness! And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to put a lid, to put an end to take it out back like behind the woodshed like Old Yeller and walk away from this week, which has been glorious with the gigantic Threadripper-based Plex server and the world's first phone with an in-display fingerprint sensor, but otherwise has been a giant sack of mediocrity and frustrating updates and GPU prices. Yeah. So hopefully we're going to keep tracking this over the next few weeks. I'd like to think as Bitcoin has dropped, that GPU demand will also drop, and that sweet deals on used GPUs are going to start showing up on Craigslist and eBay.
Any day now.
Any day now. And all those Ethereum miners decide to release the hounds, or at least release the GPUs. But oh my goodness. At Ryan Shroud is the place to find Ryan Shroud on Twitter. You can find me at Patrick Norton. PCPer.com is the most excellent place to see some of the most finest, most awesomest, most coolest, most delightfulest, and oftentimes most practical reviews of PC hardware. That's PCPer.com. You can find me at TEKTHING. That's techthing.com, or which is my weekly show where we answer viewer questions and review products and point out that Bitcoin really sucks for gaming if you need to buy a GPU. And AVXL, which is the home theater and audio podcast I do with Mr. Robert Heron. This, by the way, is Twitch This Week in Computer Hardware, and you can find all of our older episodes at twit.tv/TWiCH, including information on how to subscribe. And with that, y'all have been wonderful. Come join us next week. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shroud.
Have a great week and pray for the GPU prices to drop.